Okay. So the question that you have put will maybe take away the rest of the time because it's a fundamental question. The question you have put is change. You see, this framework which I have written on the board, let me just give you a quick background and then let me tell you who Viktor Frankl was, and in that process I'll be answering her question. Myers and Briggs were two gurus, management gurus, perhaps in 1950s, that's about 60 years ago. They made a personality test and it's available on the Google. You can Google it after when you are free, and you can take that test also. This test is, I repeat, a personality test. It's not an intelligence test. It doesn't test your intelligence, it tests your personality. The idea was whether you are suitable for a particular type of assignment. Supposing the lady here in front of me wants to be an engineer, and she becomes an engineer, but she doesn't find happiness and satisfaction. And after 10 years of engineering, she realizes that is not a right choice, it is a wrong decision she made, and she switches to something totally different. She becomes, let's say, a sculptor and starts making, sculptures. So this questionnaire is designed to test your personality. These 5 questions or 6 questions, how many are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. These 6 points are part of the process. What is the process? The first is vision. You have to ask yourself for every part 5 questions. And I don't know if I can write it here on the side. What? You must have heard this many times. Yes. What? Why? How? What? Why? How? When? And where? Now, when you start asking yourself for every part, let's start with vision. What is vision? Why is your vision what it is? And it will keep evolving, by the way. How did you reach that vision? When and where are not important in your vision. But in mission, it will become important. Supposing your vision is that, taking the example of the lady again, that she wants to be the best engineer in the world, whatever branch of engineering, we are not going into that. Then how does she become the best engineer in the world? Not in India, in the world. The best ever. That's where she has to start asking the questions, and that's where and when will become important, because where does she study? When does she study? As if you don't have the money, you want to go to an IIT, for example, but you don't have the money, so you can't go to an IIT, then you go to some other college. So where and etc. Structure, the simplest example I always give is this piece of chalk and the board. Supposing I wanted to write this and I did not have a board and a chalk, I can't do it. Execution is, I make a request to all of you, please turn to page 48 of the book. No, I am not. Example, some of you turn to page 48, some of you don't. Then I said to the gentleman here from the faculty, sir, why are you not turning to page 48? He says, nahi karunga, meri marzi. It's my life. Who are you to tell me? Main nahi karta. So you see, you may have a structure, but then you have to execute. Then you come to monitoring. Monitoring is online, real-time basis. Spelling mistakes to nahi hai. Handwriting kaisi hai. Madam is seeing very critically. This is monitoring. And then she is making a notes. And then you come to evaluation. Evaluation is, you see whether you go back to your vision mission, are you achieving your objectives? And when you go on asking these questions, the answers start emerging. Now, why I mentioned about Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl died, I think, some 30 years ago. He was one of the most famous psychiatrists of the previous century. He was a Jew. He was a German-speaking Jew in Austria. When Hitler invaded many European countries, including Austria, and caught hold of the Jews and put them into concentration camps. Dr. Viktor Frankl by that time had already achieved a lot of fame. In fact, let me tell you, he is regarded as one of the 3 best known psychiatrists of the previous 100 years, along with Carl Jung, John Adler and Viktor Frankl. These are the 3 most famous names in the West. So he was also put in a concentration camp, but he survived. Now the percentage of survival was 9, 0, 9. In Telugu, 9. 9. 91% people used to die. Now Dr. Viktor Frankl, being a very, very renowned psychiatrist and being subjected to this condition, could not help but, analyzing, and he had no place to make notes. He didn't even have paper, pen, things like that. And then he came out with this theory which is called logotherapy, as a single word, L-O-G-O therapy, T-H-E-R-A-P-Y. Logotherapy is simply defined as, from the word logic, logo, how therapy can be logically done to cure somebody of a psychiatric or psychic disorder. That is logotherapy. What he found is that if a person does not have an objective in life, so we come back to that, if you do not know where you are going, that person dies, literally. Initially he will die intellectually, emotionally, then he will die physically. Then Dr. Frankl started analyzing the deaths which were taking place. Now remember, 91 out of 100 people were dying. 91 out of 100 were dying. And then he achieved such mastery over that analysis that he used to predict that this person will die after 10 hours and that person would die more or less after 10 hours. This person will die in 3 days. Now since he survived, after he was released from the jail, he had by that time written many books. Then he wrote this book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning. Obviously this book is in German, but this is the English translation. I don't recommend anybody in this room or outside this room to read this book unless you are a very strong human being, because this book can shatter you. It is such a serious book. It is such a serious book that I know many people who cannot go beyond 20-30 pages. This book is in 2 parts. The first part is the tortures which were done on the people, the details of those tortures. So most people, they get sick. Actually, I know people who vomit when they read this book, because the details are so graphic and specific that unless you are very strong, you will not be able to read it. You will say, "Kya Khwaja Sahab ne kitab bol di, toba toba." So don't read it unless you are strong. But if you want to become strong, you can read it if you are not strong. The second part of the book is the theory. Now the key thing is this. It's not a question of, now I come to your specific point. It's not a question of looking at any issue, whether it is change, whether it is no change, whatever it is. The basic point is this. Any human being with a reasonable degree of intelligence, how does that person, she or he, understand himself or herself? You see, the first thing in life is to understand oneself. If we don't understand ourselves, how will we understand somebody else? And most of the times, we misunderstand one another because our ego does not allow us to be rational, objective, analytical, and self-critical. So 99.99% problems in life are created by us. We create our own problems. Why did I link up Viktor Frankl? I linked up Viktor Frankl because if anybody here has the courage to read that book, he or she will discover how hypocritical we are. Look at the situation in which Dr. Frankl was living in those horrible camps, torture chambers. And how did he survive? It's a story of his surviving. He was in that 9% survivors, not in the 91% mortality. And I'll give you one example from the book. It will make you understand whatever I have said so far. After he was released, and the World War II ended with the defeat of the Nazis and the victory of the Allies, he went back to his writing and his medical research. Incidentally, his wife died in the concentration camp, but she was not in the same camp, she was in a different camp. So he lost his wife during that period, but he survived. So she was in the 91 category, he was in the 9 category. He resumed his practice as a doctor. He has mentioned the case of a patient. A gentleman came to him who was referred by another psychiatrist. He was in his mid-70s. And the treatment he was undertaking for depression, he was in acute depression, it was not working. So his doctor friend referred the case to Frankl Saab. So this gentleman came. So now he has not written all those details, but he has given the pith and substance. So he asked him, why are you in this state of mind? He said, look, I lost my wife. We were a very devoted couple. I don't think any man would have loved his wife as much as I did, and I don't think any woman would have loved her husband as much as she did. So she passed away some maybe few months or a year ago, and after that I am just not able to accept life and to lead a normal life, and I am depressed. So he went through the history, acha, ye tablets, wo treatment, ye wo. Then he tried logotherapy on him, and it worked. And what was the logotherapy he tried, and how did it work? You see, he went to the logic. So he said, let's say that gentleman's name is Frank. So he said, Frank, and then he followed what is called the Socrates method of inquiry, which I will elaborate when I finish this example, the Socrates method of inquiry. He said, Frank, let's be truthful. So let's first agree that we will be truthful. You be truthful and I'll try to be truthful. Because if we are not truthful, we cannot solve your problem. So he put him the first question, are you really serious about coming out of this depression? So he said yes. No, don't say yes. Are you really serious? Do you want to come out of this depression? So Frank thought and he said yes. He said okay, fine. Then he said, let me tell you, you will come out of your depression. Because you are serious. Now this is the first principle of logotherapy, which is there in the book, that every person should have some meaning in his life. Therefore the title of the book is Man's Search for Meaning. So the first thing he did to Frank was he gave him a meaning, that he should come out of his depression. Okay. Then he said, second question, did you love Jane more, or did Jane love you more? Jane, let us say, was his wife's name. So after much questioning, he said no, both, this, and finally he said, probably she loved me more. He said, okay. Then he said, now I will put you a question. Jane is dead and you are a broken man. He said, yes. But you have just decided that you want to come out of this depression. He said, yes. Now you have a meaning and purpose in your life. Yes. Then he said, my question to you is, have you ever thought, if you had died first and Jane had lived, what would happen to Jane? So he said, well, I never thought of it like that. He said, please think. Now obviously this therapy would have taken place over many sessions and many hours. We are just giving you the substance. It's not that it happened in this type of atmosphere that Khwaja Saab comes and he says something and he goes away. So then Frank said, yes, I think if I had died first, she would have died within few days of a broken heart. Then Dr. Frankl came out with the Guru Mantra. He said, don't you think you are very lucky? Because had you died first, you would have been responsible for the death of your wife. Now just look at the logic. He himself has said that if he had died first, Jane would not have outlived beyond a few days. Then he started thinking, and then he said, yes, I think you are right. Then he said, don't you think that Jane, even in her death, has given you the greatest gift, which is to live after her and to live with her memory. And now you think only of good things about your wife, all the positives. And you know, he was cured of his depression. Now the Socratean method of inquiry is very simple. Everybody in this room would have heard of Socrates. You know, Aristotle, Socrates, these are the great Greek thinkers. Socrates perfected, amongst other things, the art of inquiry. And these questions which you see behind me on the board, these are the questions Socrates would put.